Marriage and Family Life is offering the Smart Step Family class starting Wednesday, September 5th. This is an important series to encourage step families at Canyon View and in our community. 46% of marriages today are remarriages for one or both partners. The rate of divorce for remarriages with stepchildren is 50% higher than in those without. 1 out of 3 Americans is now a step-parent, stepchild, step-sibling, step-grandparent, or some other member of a step family. And predictions show that now there are more step families in the U.S. than any other type of family. Join our Smart Step Family class September 5th and for the following 7 weeks. This will be a DVD series with teaching followed by important table discussion. You can find more information on these classes at the Marriage and Family Life desk or on our website under Ministries.
Well, good morning. How you guys doing? You guys, you ready for school to begin? That is always such an interesting reaction. Because there's a lot of, there's a lot of parents in here, and I don't know, if it's like almost like everyone still remembers the scarring from childhood of when the summer ended and they had to go back to school. And even though you get to now pawn your kids off onto the school district and have a little more freedom, you're still like, whoa. But I love this time of year. I feel like this is probably the practical New Year. January is the actual New Year, but this is the practical New Year. This is when new plans begin and new momentum starts and new initiatives begin. And even if you are not a child or you do not have children, the impact in your business and at your workplace and just in society, you still feel the new kind of school year beginning. And so I just want to start out by just saying that God has a plan for you. Do you guys know that? That God has a plan for you? For some of you, that's maybe sounds a little cliche. It might be the first time you've heard it, but I hope throughout this it actually impacts you, that God has a plan for your life. And He has a plan for you, and He has a plan for this scholastic year for you. And so, like I said, what I really like about this is I do young adult ministry, and we have a lot of college students. And college students are really excited this time of year, at least hopefully they are, because they have got a plan. They have their life planned out, right? And this is them, they're just beginning their life, especially the freshmen at college. I worked at Target in Flagstaff, and it was the biggest sales season for them in the entire year. It even beats Christmas in a lot of ways, was the back-to-school rush, because they were right next to the campus in Flagstaff, Target was, and they beat every store nationally in sales during the back-to-school season. And I just loved the buzz. Every student's there getting a bunch of plastic containers and plastic furniture and just really low quality but cheap stuff to fill their dorm room with. But there's this buzz that happens as students are really excited. And parents they're taking, moms are dragging their kids down the aisle and are really excited about decorating their dorm room, and the kid could care less. He's just wondering when she's going to go so he can go find the parties. Last night, we live by the college on purpose. We want to be around the environment we're trying to reach. And last night, it was just almost awkward if you didn't know school was beginning. There were just hordes of young people just wandering the streets, right? And they're all trying to find the party they're going to crash. But this time of year, there's a buzz because that freshman knows that they are beginning their life and that they're going to start studying to begin their future. That right now there's a whole bunch of young future doctors and young future astronauts, and in reality, young future major changers. That they're going to be changing their majors when they realize that actually not a doctor, not an astronaut. Besides, that'll all be done by robots in the future anyway, if you haven't been watching online. But and so they get excited and they do school, and then this time of year you also have your graduates who graduated college, and now they're really kind of plugging into their career this time of year, and they're really getting that going. And then you have your young parents who tomorrow morning they're going to drop their 5-year-old off, and they're going to arrive at the school, and mom's going to be holding it in, trying to be strong, and then she's going to get her kid there and just want to give a hug and make it a special moment and take a picture, and he's just going to show up, and he's going to see the room full of kids, and he's going to be like, what? You can make shapes with pretzels on construction paper? See you, Mom. And he's going to take off, and she's going to go, bye-bye, baby. But there's going to be so much hope as that child, as him or her begins their life. And as the parents look at what is their child going to become, what plans are in their future, and the same for the middle schooler who finally has a locker for the first time ever, and that's exciting, and won't be able to remember the combo, 5 hours into tomorrow, and will need it unlocked by an administrator. And high schoolers, just talked to one high school girl who this is her sophomore year, and she's excited because she'll be driving this year. And so there's so many plans we have, and on the cycle goes. That high schooler then turns into the college student, who turns into the young parent, and on go the plans for people's future. And so we all have plans, and we all have hopes and dreams. But if you've been around long enough, if you've lived life at least a year, then you know that sometimes it doesn't go according to plan, does it? Sometimes it doesn't work out as you would have pictured. Maybe you're single longer than you thought you would be single. Maybe you're recently divorced, and you thought you would never be recently divorced or ever divorced. And who knows where you're at in life. Maybe there's an illness that was not what you thought was going to happen. Maybe you're a single mom, and you didn't know that was going to happen. And the good news for you is that we have a single mom as one of our main characters in the story today. And it's obviously not a story, but it really happened. But Hagar is a single mom. But we all know that if we've lived life long enough, that it doesn't go according to plan, does it? And as life doesn't go according to plan, I think we tend to begin to discount ourselves. It's really common as I sit and I'll counsel people, even young adults with so much future, it's obvious that what they do is they look at other people's lives and they go, those people, that's who God uses. Those people, the ones who were happily married at an early age and started a young family, and they just seem to always do the right thing and have life go right for them. That's who God uses. But God can't use me because I have sinned, because I'm a bad example, because I went left when I should have gone right or stayed straight on the path. And so God can't use me. For this service less than the 9 o'clock, 9 o'clock we had a lot of jokes about, having coffee on Thursday and still not being able to sleep through the night and having to get up and go to the bathroom 5 times because of that. But last service even more, it's an older service because it's the earlier service. And there, the tendency is to say, you know what? I'm too old. It's now time to look towards retirement and just kick back and just let the next generation do it. But maybe in this service more, it's I'm too young. No one will hear me. No one will listen to what I have to say. I'm too young to really begin God's plan for my life. Or maybe it's I'm too sinful. I have too much of a past. God cannot use me. He had a plan for me, but I messed up. And so now his plan is void. Or I'm unworthy. I'm unwanted. Whatever it is, it's easy to get steered off the plan of God for our life and to think that he's done with us. But as the title says, and what I really want you to know, is that God has a plan for you, and God is not done with you. As Philippians 1 says, that the good work that he began in you, he is going to carry out until the day of salvation, until he returns. God has a plan for your life, not had, and God will see it carried out. He is not done with you. And so we're going to look at two characters who, for different reasons, we would think God's done with them. And one of them is Abraham. And if you haven't been with us, Abraham was a northern Iraqi guy. And God showed up to him one night and said, hey, Abe, I want you to join my story. I have a plan for you. Are you in? And it said that Abraham believed that God had a plan for him, and so he engaged God in God's plan for Abraham's life. And then later on, God told him, he said, hey, my plan is to give you a child. You don't have a child yet. He and Sarah, his wife, were around 88 years when God called him, or 80 years when God called him, and they had not had a kid yet. And God looked at him, and God said, I am going to give you a child, and through your child, I am going to change the world. And what's awesome is that child was not just Isaac, but through Isaac came Jacob, and Jacob, Joseph, and the people of Israel, and then Moses, and Joshua, and David, and all these wonderful biblical characters. But none of them were actually God's plan for Abraham. But it was long after, when from the line of David came Jesus. And that through Jesus, the whole world is blessed. And that is the promise that God gave to Abraham, is through your offspring. And the Apostle Paul says that's singular, not many people, but one person shall all the nations of the world be blessed. And so God tells Abraham, I have this plan for you, and it's to give you a kid. And it says that Abraham believes him. And so that in believing God, he was counted as righteous. But Sarah hears this story, and Sarah laughs at God. She goes, that's ridiculous. I'm like 80 years old. What 80-year-old woman has a child? Right? And she'd never heard of the Guinness Book of World Records, but she would have wound up in it probably. And so she laughs at God. She goes, that's ridiculous. That is silly. And so she conceives of this silly plan, this dumb plan, and she goes, well, God must have meant it, but he doesn't know what he's talking about. Maybe God flunked biology when he was like in young deity school, or I don't know what happened to God, but he obviously doesn't understand the female reproductive system, and furthermore, I'm barren. This doesn't work out. We haven't had a child yet. And so she laughs at him and conceives this plan. She goes, but Abraham, I got a way we can not embarrass God. God can save face still. We can still bring his plan about, but we'll do it. We don't need God to do it. We'll do it. I've got this slave girl from Egypt. Her name's Hagar. And she's a real hottie, Hagar the hottie. And so I got an idea, Abraham. Why don't you marry her as well, and then she'll provide us with a child. That's how we'll do it. And so Abraham wasn't thinking too well, and he's like, all right, that sounds great. She is good looking, okay. And so he sleeps with Hagar, and she gets pregnant with the son whose name is Ishmael. And then Sarah one day is going, you should sleep with Hagar. And then the next day is looking at Hagar, and she's like, oh, I'm so jealous. And she gets jealous of Hagar, and she, her mind starts to kind of, well, maybe he likes her more than me. And now that he has her, he doesn't need me. And I mean, no woman in here ever does that, right? No woman in here ever does that, but it's just her. And so she kicks out Hagar. And she beats Hagar, and Hagar flees. And God encounters Hagar. And see, God is the God of single moms. I want you to know that in here, as well as anyone else. But he encounters Hagar and goes, I have a plan for your life, Hagar. Don't worry. You will not bring the promised child. The lineage that I promised to Abraham, that offspring, Jesus, will not come through Ishmael. He will not come through you. But that does not mean I don't have a plan for you. And so God tells Hagar to go back, and Abraham raises Ishmael till he's 16 years old. And that's where we find the story today. And we are in Genesis 21. And what I want you to look for as we read this, and as you're flipping to it or pulling your app out and looking at the scripture through that, is I want you to see how much God does. Like how faithful God is. That no matter what happens in our life, and as the saying goes in 1 Timothy, that even when we aren't faithful, God is still faithful because he cannot deny his own character. Is that God is always good, he always does what's right, and he's very consistent in character. And I just want you to see this faithfulness of God come through. Verse 1 of chapter 21 of Genesis. The Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did to Sarah as he had promised. And Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age at the time of which God had spoken to him. So God spoke, and he did, and God said to Sarah, and he did, and God promised, and he did. Abraham called the name of his son who was born to him, whom Sarah bore him, Isaac. And Isaac means he laughs or laughter, and we'll find out why. Sarah will explain why that's his name. And Abraham circumcised his son when he was 8 days old, as God had commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son was born to him. And Sarah said, God has made laughter for me out of joy. This is unbelievable. Everyone who hears this will laugh over me because it just sounds ridiculous, and they're going to be so happy for me. And she said, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? And she's pretty old at this point. Yet I have borne him a son in his old age. In case you're unfamiliar with the Bible, and you think it's just a bunch of weird myths that don't really happen, and so people lived a long time, and so they must have had kids when they were 100 years old. So that maybe wasn't weird then. No, it was weird. It was weird then. It's weird now, and it's just as weird then. Okay? He was 100 years old. And it is kind of funny. It's good that his name's Isaac, because it is kind of funny, because when Isaac was born and Abraham was 100 years old, really old, they kind of had similar birthdays. On their first birthday, or on Isaac's first birthday and on Abraham's 101st, they probably both ate applesauce. They probably both drooled a little bit. They probably both sat down, as Jerry Seinfeld said, they both sat down at their birthday. And they both probably had to be told, they probably looked at the people around them a little confused, and they had to be told, these are your friends? My friends, right? And they probably both had to have ice cream cake. And so it is kind of funny, because when Abraham's friends would be practicing their golf swing and going to the driving range and hanging out at the country club, Abraham's going to soccer games and t-ball games and whatever the cultural equivalent was then. And they're probably looking at him walking in with Isaac, and they're going, oh, your grandpa brought you. Grandpa's the dad, I'm the dad, okay, and probably had to put up with that. And so he was 100 years old. And what's amazing is that his legacy, and we should all be living to leave a legacy, not just for ourselves, but to leave an impact and to make a difference. And we should be living how we raise our family, what you teach your kids, how you display marriage, how you display God. All of that should be to leave a legacy that your kids would grow up to know God, and that they would raise children, your grandchildren, to know God, and that those would raise your great-grandchildren to know who God is, and every one of them to make a difference in the world and to be upright and good people. And what's amazing is that Abraham's legacy, it began at 100 years old. It began at 100 years old. That is amazing. And we went to the leadership summit, the global leadership summit that Willow Creek puts on last week. And there was a pastor there. His name was Craig Groeschel. And he was talking about the generations need to come together, and the younger need to serve the older, and the older serve the younger. And he looked at the older generation out there, and he said this to him. He said, if you're not dead, you're not done. God is never done with you. Did you know that there's no mention really of retirement in the Bible? There's no idea that for so many years you will serve your community, but then once you hit a certain point, you get to live just for yourself? That then life gets to be all about relaxing and living for yourself? Nowhere in the Bible is there retirement. All right? Yes, you can slow down. Yes, you can take it a little easier. That's okay. But the idea is that the old should always be pouring into the young. And so the few of you who are living, now you're hitting more the golden years of your life. Make these the best years of your life. Make these the years of your greatest impact. Use retirement as a time to free yourself up Now you don't have to do a job. Now you can just serve the kingdom of God. And make these the biggest years of your impact. And we will talk about some of the ways you can do that as we look at Hagar. All right, this is a younger service. And so a lot of you are going, well, this is completely irrelevant. This has nothing to do with me. I'm not 100 years old. I still have a good 80 years before that happens, a good 70 years before that happens. You know what you should do then? You should go and you should make yourself a timeline on a piece of paper. Just take your paper and turn it landscape, right? Horizontal. And put 0, birth. And then put 85 over here. And then put about where you would be. And then go, here's what I would like to do before I reach 85. Reverse engineer your life for greatest impact. Most of us just kind of live life day by day, and that's all right, but if you really want to leave an impact, reverse engineer your life. Think this. This is what John Maxwell said in a podcast I listened to. He's a great leadership coach. And he said, I challenge all leaders to write down one sentence. What is the one thing you want people to say at your funeral? Have you ever thought about that? What do you want people to say at your funeral? That you had a great golf swing? That you had the most comfortable lazy boy? Right? That you bought the best Toyota when you were older? I mean, what really do you want people to say? What kind of impact do you want to have? Put that down and then live your life to achieve that impact. I thought about it and I realized doing Wednesday night, what I want people to say is the ministry he built changed my life. And I thought about that. I don't want people to say, he changed my life, because I can't do that and I'm not that great. But I do want to build something and be a part of something that raises up leaders who go out also and they impact people. I want it to be about more than me. I want it to be about the leader's impact. So I want not just me, but leaders in my ministry. And I want to build a ministry that changes people's lives. What do you want to do? Reverse engineer your life. And the amazing thing is it's never too late. It's not too late for you to leave an impact. And then so moving on, verse 8. And the child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast on that day that Isaac was weaned. All right, in case you're wondering what this is they would try to breastfeed the child as long as they could because infant mortality rates were so high. So they tried to keep them on the mother's milk so they could be best nourished. And if they could get them to age 3 that way, getting antibodies and nourishment, and they could wean them into solid food, the child was most likely to live. So they would celebrate that. And that's what they're doing. They're celebrating that Isaac he's going to make it. He's going to make it. They're celebrating this. And so, but Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, laughing. So she said to Abraham, cast out this slave woman with her son. For the son of this slave woman shall not be heir with my son Isaac. And this thing was very displeasing to Abraham on account of his son. I don't know about you, but as we've been going through Genesis, I'm probably not Sarah's number one fan anymore. Anyone else just feels like, dude, this lady is bitter and causes drama. Hey, Abraham, you should sleep with my servant. Next day, how dare you sleep with my servant? I can't believe you did that, you scum. Right? And the great irony to getting offended that Ishmael, the older child, is laughing at Isaac, like laughing in mockery at what they think. The great irony to it that Sarah is so self-righteous, and I can't believe the nerve, is that earlier on in Genesis, Sarah got caught laughing at God. When God told Abraham that she was going to have a child, she went, God's crazy. Your God's nuts, man. Like, I feel like in heaven, Job's wife and Sarah are probably going to hang out. If you don't know Job's wife, everything was going wrong for Job. Basically the modern day is their house fell down and killed all their children while their children were eating lunch. And then he kind of lost his job because his livestock and his crops died, like just overnight. And Satan asked, hey God, can I tempt him to make him not believe in you anymore, and God goes, fine, give it a shot, but you can't kill him. And so Satan does everything to Job to try to ruin him. He takes everything from Job, everything. And Job, even his health, he sits on a pile of dirt at one point with just blisters and boils all over his skin, and everything is taken from him, but his wife. And she comes up to him and is just a real encouraging, outstanding, uplifting wife and says, Job, why don't you just curse God and die? And Job's probably going, take her too. Why did you leave her? And I feel like Sarah's kind of the same, just causing drama. And, last night as I was, reviewing this, I really felt God kind of speak to me about the heart of Sarah. And I think what's going on is Sarah never really addresses the issues in her life. She never sits down with Hagar and never really sits down with Abraham and really works through what's causing her to be so upset. And I feel like we have a tendency to do that. And in light of the idea that God has a plan and he's working it out in your life, I think a big stumbling block for that plan coming to fruition in our lives is us not dealing with the emotional baggage we carry. And so maybe you've been offended, maybe you've been hurt, maybe someone at a church, this is like your 5th church, and guess what? We're just as bad as the other ones you came from. And so if you want, I can offend you right now and you can move on. Or you can deal with the offense of the first church, and you can accept that that's what's driving you. Or some of you, you had an abusive or maybe an absent parent, and you've never really gotten over that, and you just try to forget, and you go, well, God removes, as the east is from the west, so he removes sins from us. So that sin's over there. It doesn't matter anymore. Yet you can't really have good relationships. You always find yourself emotionally reacting poorly to things or just emotionally shutting down. And maybe it's because you need to go back and you need to sit down with a parent and you need to first forgive them, and then second, let them know how they've hurt you. Or maybe you're the offender. Maybe you've caused harm and there's some offenses you need to apologize for. There's some people you need to go to and go, man, I know this is messing you up. Because see, I think we have a tendency in church to just spiritualize everything and to just kind of ignore it and just kind of shove it under the carpet or into the closet and just, that's not that big a deal. And we put on a face and we use spiritual language and we use religious rules to justify how we feel and the way we act. But in reality, you're deeply hurt. You're deeply insecure. And I would say some of you need to leave this service today and pick up that phone. And you need to make a phone call. And as I'm saying this, some of you have people in mind that are popping up. And you're like, yeah, no, not that person. Definitely not that person. And there's someone and you're trying to pretend like that's not the one you need to call. Well, why do you keep thinking about them? I think it's because God's putting that on your heart. There's some offense you need to deal with. You need to process through some of this stuff that's happened to you. But Sarah doesn't process. She just freaks out. She goes Jerry Springer. And you know what the reassuring thing is I looked up celebrities who are Jewish, and did you know Jerry Springer comes from Jewish lineage? And that might seem strange till you see the father of the Jews, Abraham, and you look at his family, and then you go, oh no, it makes total sense. Abraham Springer right here. And so it is reassuring to see that God, he still works his plan out in our life as he works out the problems in our life. That these guys are works in progress. Is that Abraham is goofed up. Sarah reacts poorly all the time. And God still continues to work with them. And he can work with you. But he wants to work that stuff out in you. And so, hear the heart of Abraham and God in this. Sarah goes, you've got to get rid of her. Right? You've got to get rid of her. It's your fault. And so this thing was very displeasing to Abraham on account of his son. He didn't want to abandon his child. And just to let you know, Ishmael was probably 14 to 17 around this time. So he could start to take care of himself in this culture. He would start hunting and he would start learning to be a man and taking over. And so it's not quite as bad as, a woman with a 2-year-old. he's old enough, but it still upsets Abraham. He doesn't want to lose his son. But God says to Abraham, be not displeased because of the boy and because of your slave woman. Whatever Sarah says to you, do as she